Welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts with Taylor Smith. This is for the 8-game Tuesday, March 5th slate at DraftKings. We're going to go game by game and point you to the best plays of the day. This video is sponsored by DFS Hero, a really versatile lineup optimizer that you can use to try to score a GPP takedown. Right now, you can actually get 15% off when you use our link at the bottom of this video in the description. Let's jump right into it, Taylor. We got a pretty big slate here. Right away, Magic and Hornets, 8.5-point spread with Orlando as a favorite on the road. This game has a pretty gross 207.5 total. We do know Markelle Fultz is out, but everybody else for the Magic is in. On the other side, LaMelo Ball and Mark Williams remain out, but we also do not have Seth Curry, Cody Martin, and possibly Nick Richards. So the Hornets are pretty shorthanded, and we know Fultz not being there opens up maybe 15 to 20 minutes for the Orlando Guards. So starting with the Magic side, who do you like?
Really no one. I don't think the Fultz news does anything. Gary Harris will play more, but he's awful, so not playing him. Otherwise, they have a pretty deep rotation, almost a full complement of guys, so don't see much worth getting to from Orlando.
Yeah, it's still the Hornets and no Fultz, so I don't mind if you land on Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs at their respective price points. But yeah, nobody really stands out because the Hornets are not as fun of a matchup when LaMelo Ball is not around. On the other side, I have to imagine you don't really like the Hornets either because their matchup is horrible. But is there anybody that looks good for you for Charlotte?
Yeah, Micic started the last game, played 36 minutes. Should see similar burn tonight just because they have no guards left. He and Mann look fine. Mann often doesn't close games, though, which is kind of an issue with him. Nick Richards being questionable is also meaningful just because Grant Williams could play a ton of minutes by default. Yeah, it's not a great situation. I guess Richards out is also worth a dart throw, 4K flat, but use Bertans. There are a lot of ways that can go wrong. So even though it's a bad spot and they have a sub 100 team total, I do think Charlotte is worth monitoring tonight.
Yeah, if there's an absence of bodies there, then by default, some guys are going to look pretty good. I don't feel amazing about going back to the Grant Williams chalk well here if that ends up being the case. Right now, he's not pulling ownership. His price is elevated to 5.4K, and the matchup is obviously horrible. But he did play 40 minutes and put up 44 fantasy points in his last game. So if he's looking at a monster role like that again, I think you absolutely can consider him. And I'm with you across the board with the Hornets, although I'm not really trying to get there if I don't have to. Celtics take on the Cavs in Cleveland. We definitely have some injury news here. Boston is an 8-point favorite, and the total is 215.5. So not a very alluring total here. But we do know that Jaylen Brown and Kristaps Porzingis are both questionable. I don't know if that's been updated since then. But yeah, that's what it was earlier in the day. On the other side, the Cavs remain without Donovan Mitchell. Let's see here. Max Strus was added to the injury report. He is out, and Karis LeVert and Isaac Okoro are both questionable. So potentially a lot of minutes and usage to go on both sides of this one. It's not really a good matchup for either side, but when you eliminate guys from the player pool, things start to pop. So starting with Boston, who do you like?
Really no one if they're all in, but certainly Tatum would look better if Porzingis and or Brown are out. Ditto for Holiday and White. Holiday in particular in the 6K range. I think he's 6'1", looks pretty good. Wouldn't mind that, even in a rough, kind of ugly, low-paced style game. If they're missing two starters, there's a better chance they don't just completely wipe the floor with the Cavs in this game. So in theory, that makes Tatum look better from a minutes and usage perspective. But if everyone's in, I'll not be too much on Boston.
Yeah, if Porzingis is out, obviously you can look at Al Horford, and if he and Jaylen Brown are out, you can look at guys like Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard, maybe even Xavier Tillman. It really depends
Pritchard.
on Pritchard. What did I say? I said Pritchard.
He's so French.
I don't know.
Pritchard.
I don't know. I was racing through that. Anyways, I still think that is good value if both of those guys miss. I'm with you, though. If those guys are in, I'm not really looking at Boston. On the Cleveland side, obviously Darius Garland, Evan Mobley look really good again with Donovan Mitchell out, Max Strus being out, and potentially LeVert and Okoro being out, open things up. So how are you feeling about the Cavs if those guys miss?
Yeah, Merrill's going to play 30-ish minutes no matter what. He's 4-1. I'm a a little nervous about him being maybe the chalkiest guy on the slate because he's Sam Merrill. But, if Okoro and or Levert.
I think that's okay, though. I think he's probably good chalk at 4.1.
Yeah, he's just cheap enough to where it's fine, but it is a bad spot, and he is Sam Merrill. So,
yeah, it's true.
There's cause for pause if Levert and Okoro are in. Levert, I think, looks really good if he's in at 5.5. I don't think he'll be limited. He's been dealing with an elbow, so I think he should see 30-ish minutes if he's in. Mitchell being out obviously opens up usage for him as well. Yeah, Mobley and Garland, not really cheap at this point. Neither is Allen, but they're okay. I'm not going to really prioritize Allen, I don't think, in this matchup, especially if Porzingis is in. Garland's okay, but again, the matchup for guards against Boston's not generally a good one, and they can kind of focus their attention on him, especially if Levert's also out.
Yeah, I don't think Garland and Mobley would be auto core plays like they were the other day, and like they have been recently with Spida out. But Merrill would be a core play for me if Levert and Okoro miss. If those guys are in, I do think if the chalk sticks there on Merrill, that would be an interesting fade just because he would still get like 25 minutes just because Mitchell is out. But it would be a lot more volatile than it is looking at Levert and Okoro being out. So I need those guys to be out to feel amazing about Merrill. But I think he's on the table regardless. The Sixers and the Nets are the next game. That game is in Brooklyn with a 217 total. The Sixers are 1-point dogs. Tyrese Maxey has been ruled out. Obviously, Joel Embiid remains out. DeAnthony Melton remains out. Cameron Payne and KJ Martin are also on the injury report. Not sure how much they matter. You can fill that in. But obviously, Maxey being out is pretty huge. So who do you like for Philly with that news in mind?
Oubre is the one that looks the best for 5.3, assuming he's going to jump back into the starting group. Guard forward eligible. I think that's pretty useful. Should see usage too. Obviously, Maxey and Embiid being out, that's 30% usage guys missing from the lineup. So he and Tobias are going to probably do most of the chucking along with Buddy. You can make a case for all three of them. Kyle Lowry for 5.2 is kind of expensive for Kyle Lowry, but especially if Payne is out, he's going to have to play minutes by default. So all four of those guys are in play. Not really looking to Bamba. He's been kind of a fake starter the last couple games. Paul Reed's still playing more of the minutes at center. I think Reed for 5.1 is actually kind of sneaky in a tournament, especially against Brooklyn, a team that's pretty thin up front behind Nick Claxton. So don't mind Reed for tournaments, and I will be getting to a lot of the other high usage Sixers.
Yeah, I don't really want to play with the Bamba Reed thing personally, but I understand that. I mean, can we dust off Lowry at 5.2K? I mean, there's that with no Maxey. I'd really like to buy a Harris at 7.2. I think it's a good price for increased usage here without Maxey in there. And then Buddy Hield and Oubre, like you said, they both look pretty good, really cheap. DraftKings just like stopped working on me, so that's really fun. It's like down for site maintenance out of nowhere. Anyway, so over to the net side we go. Mikal Bridges leads the way with a 36-point projection. He's not going to carry any ownership. The Sixers are not a daunting defensive matchup whatsoever when Embiid's not there. So obviously you can consider him up top at 7.5. Looks like Lonnie Walker's on the injury report, and I believe Ben Simmons is out again, and we know Cam Thomas isn't playing. So that solidifies Cam Johnson, Dennis Schroeder, who I feel like these guys are on every damn slate that we look at. It's like Nets season every day, but they still look good. And Nick Claxton is cheap at 6.7K. So the Nets are pretty viable here. Who are you looking at for Brooklyn and who stands out?
Yeah, Nick Claxton is cheap, and his backup, Day'Ron Sharpe, is out. So potentially a higher minutes for him. No Embiid for Philly obviously makes that a much cushier matchup than it normally would be. Finney Smith is always a value I kind of get to, even though it's disgusting, just because he has a path to mid-30s minutes at 4.5. Obviously, I prefer him to go away, and hopefully better value will emerge later in the day. But for now, I'm kind of getting to him a little bit. Yeah, like you said, Schroeder and Johnson, kind of the main guys here besides Claxton. Otherwise, not looking at too much else.
Yep, we are in agreement. All right, Pistons and Miami in South Beach. The Pistons are massive, 11.5-point dogs. It's the biggest line of the night, so pretty safe to expect a blowout here. I know Tyler Hero is out for Miami. Let's see what else is standing out. Nothing really that I can see for here. On the Pistons side, they look to be somewhat at full or mostly at full strength here. Not a good matchup, even with Hero. Obviously, not that he's a good defender. But are there any Pistons that you like for tonight?
Is Quentin Grimes out, or
I know
what's
he's
the deal with that?
questionable. Maybe he was even doubtful.
Yeah, I think Marcus Sasser is kind of okay. Yeah, he's doubtful.
Yeah.
So I think Marcus Sasser's okay at 3-4, just kind of as a flyer. I think he played 25 minutes in the last game with Grimes out, so that's not the worst punt. But it looks like he might garner a little bit of ownership, so perhaps not the most ideal play there. Otherwise, yeah, Duran and Cunningham worth keeping in your player pool just because they have ceilings, but for the most part, this team looks like one to fade.
Yeah, probably so. I don't think I'm going to work hard to get to them by any means, but Azar Thompson does look pretty good at 5.7K. I mean, every slate, like the last 3 times we talked about him, he gets burned, dude. He's getting a lot of minutes. He's not always going to produce with those minutes, and the matchup isn't great. But also, it's kind of like one of those things when Cade and Dern are the guys that the Heat are focusing on, he might benefit from that, from the defense sagging over by him or something. So I do like him a little bit at 5.7. But that's probably it. I like to point out of Sasser as a punt at 3.4K, but I'm not necessarily going to try to get there. On the Miami side, obviously Hero being out opens up some usage. Terry Rozier looks good at 6.5K. Duncan Robinson has been playing a lot and doing pretty well. His price feels a little bit steep at 5.8K at this point. And then obviously Bam and Jimmy look really good up top. How do you feel about Miami?
Yeah, I'll be getting to about Rozier and Bam are kind of around 20% for me so far. Both look really good. Bam at 8.4 is just underpriced, especially for a matchup against Detroit. Rozier, like you said, no hero, more usage for him. Minutes have been pretty stable, so fine with that. Jimmy, not getting too much at all right now. I think there are just other guys to prioritize it forward, especially with that Oubre and Tobias stuff happening for Philly. So I do think Butler's a fine play, but I think he might slip through the cracks a little for me.
Yeah, which is interesting because he's the highest owned Miami player so far. When I first looked at this slate this morning, I was pretty high on Jimmy. I still do like him. I think it's a good price, great matchup, and obviously no hero is good for him. But yeah, good point, because the Sixers really open things up and make him less of a necessity. And like at center, you're kind of looking at like Wemby, Bam, and Şengün tonight for the most part, beyond like punting. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you here for sure. Hawks and Knicks in Madison Square Garden. Jalen Brunson is questionable. I would imagine maybe closer to doubtful based off of this tight line. If he was in, I would think they're going to be bigger than 3-point favorites against the Hawks, but I could be wrong. Obviously, if he's out, that's massive. The Hawks continue to go to war without Okongwu and Trae Young. DeJounte Murray up top at 9.4K with a 43-point projection is the best overall play for the Hawks, but is there anybody else that you like, and are you paying for him?
No, I'm not really getting to anyone here. Not a good spot for them on the road. Low total. They've been priced up for the Trae Young missing situation. So, maybe a dusting of Bogdanovic or Capella. Capella at 5.7, I think, still has a little bit of meat on the bone, but the minutes are not really there. So this team looks largely avoidable.
Yep, I agree. It's Boggy and Clint for me. I don't think DeJounte or Jalen are bad plays. I just don't think they're priorities on this slate. On the Knicks side, obviously, is there any new news with Brunson?
Nope.
Okay, so he's questionable. I would not be shocked at this point if he's out. He played 1 minute and left with a knee contusion in his last game and did not return. So I don't see why they wouldn't play it safe. If he is out, Miles McBride should start in at 5.5K. Played 47 minutes last time he was in for Brunson. Basically, any Knicks guys who start, you can lock in for 30 to 35 minutes every single night. So I would like McBride a lot at 5.5K and be a borderline core play. Actually, he just would be a core play against the Hawks. So how are you feeling about him and the Knicks?
I was just laughing at the Josh Hart game logs. Like he's played 45 or more minutes in 2 games in a row. He has like 40 rebounds in the last 2 games, triple-double in the last, like just unbelievable stuff. He's 7.9, so it's like the most we've ever paid for Josh Hart, but the minutes are so good that I still think he's in play, especially in a good matchup like this against Atlanta. Their total is so low. Like I know that they, without Brunson, obviously struggled to score, but a 109 total against the Hawks, like the worst defense in the league, playing at a really fast pace, is just kind of jarring. But Hart, DiVincenzo will look better if Brunson is out. Still think they're playable in tournaments if he's in. Brunson himself looks like a really good low-owned tournament play if he plays, because it is a knee injury, but if he plays, I assume he's good to go. Certainly McBride, if he's out, is close to a lock at 5-5 if he's going to be capable of playing 47 minutes. So literally anyone at any price that plays 47 minutes is playable.
Yeah, if Brunson is in, I'm not really forcing my way to Knicks here, even though I like the spot, because the prices are all pretty elevated for that. If he's out, everybody looks good, but McBride is the only one I would deem a core play. Pelicans and Raptors in Toronto. The Raptors are 9.5-point home dogs. This game does have a 228.5 total, so pretty decent NBA DFS environment if the game can stay close. On the Pels side, you have Zion Williamson leading the way with a 39-point projection, but Ingram is right there with them. And then CJ McCollum is coming in at 34. So obviously the big three for the Pels continue to look good. The only problem is when they're all at full strength, it's really tough to differentiate and decide who we want to play. I'm probably just not looking at the Pels on this slate. I don't see them as a real priority. It is a decent spot, but Ingram and Zion are both at 8K or higher. And unless somebody is out, I just don't really gravitate towards the Pels. How about you?
Yeah, I'm willing to go there just because Toronto's like a really bad defense these days. They do have a 119 total. Everybody in should mean low ownership for them. I think Ingram's my favorite guy here for 8K. Tobias would be popular in that range. Jimmy might be popular. Brandon Ingram arguably has the best matchup of the group. So if he's going to be a fraction of the ownership, I really like that as kind of a single entry pay up to be contrarian type of play. He and Zion, you can kind of make the same case for. Valanciunas, just because he's 6'2", I think is okay. Revenge game for him. But center obviously has a lot of opportunity cost, certainly on a slate of this size. So Valanciunas has a path to failure, which makes him a pure GPP dart throw.
Yeah, I'm based on the matchup and the prices and projections, I'm totally okay with Zion and Ingram and even CJ and JV. I just don't really – I'm not going to go to my way to use them. On the other side of the Raptors, they do have a lot of usage opening up with Scotty Barnes injured and out for this game. Jakob Poeltl, I believe, is also out or at least questionable. Do we
out.
Send him? He's out? Okay, so his price is high, but Kelly Olynyk is viable, even at 6.3K. And then obviously Quickly and RJ Barrett look pretty good. Their prices haven't budged enough given the Scotty Barnes news. And then obviously you got a lot of value across the board here with Dick, Gary Trent, and how do you say this guy's name?
Abaji.
I mean, he played really well in this last game. It's only 4.8K, so he's even viable too. So how do you feel? It's not a great matchup. The Pels are pretty good defensively, but how do you feel about Toronto?
Yeah, they look awesome. Bruce Brown also out, so that's why guys like Abaji, Grady Dick, and Jordan Nwora are playable. Olynyk should start with Poeltl out. He looks phenomenal at 6'3". I'm happy to pay up for him just because he's really good per minute. Minutes should not be in question for him. Even if the game gets out of hand, I think 30 is reasonable to expect. Quickly and Barrett have come up, but maybe not enough. They're just going to get tons of usage with Scotty out, presumably for the season. Happy to look their way. Agbaji, not a good per minute guy, but minutes are safe. Ditto for Grady Dick off the bench. It doesn't look like either of them is going to be popular, so I'm fine with them as cheaper contrarian plays. Gary Trent, I think, is also worth a look. 5.4 is a lot for him, but 34 minutes last game should see a stable run. You can make a case for this team as the best team to target on the slate, even though they're like 10-point dogs at home.
Yep, I'm with you there. All right, Spurs and Rockets.
I wanted to add, I would be reluctant to play Nwora at ownership if he's going to be really popular. He might play less than 20 minutes. So if a guy's going to be chalky and have such a thin role that, he's going to be that I don't know. I just feel like it's very easy to get away from that if he's going to be chalk.
Yeah, what's he coming in at? 24%. Yeah, see, we fell for this before.
We certainly did when he was starting, and he's not even starting now. So.
I know. And he is an offensive player first, too. So if his shots aren't falling, that could be ugly in a hurry. I didn't know he was that chalky, so I'm glad you pointed it out. I don't really want to do that, although he does save cash, and they are without some key bodies. So it's viable. I just don't like it, really. All right, so Spurs and Rockets are the next game. San Antonio is a 7.5-point underdog on the road. This game has a 228 total, largely thanks to the terrible Spurs defense. Pretty big news with Wemby listed as a game-time call. He comes in with a really nice 55-point fantasy point projection. I think he's the second highest projection of the entire slate, just behind Luka. He's got a 28% boom rating. The Rockets aren't really that bad of a matchup. So he looks really good, but the price is up and his status is obviously in question. I actually want him to miss because there's a lot to like for the Spurs if he's out. How do you feel about this situation?
Yeah, I mean, if he plays, he's fabulous. I don't know if projections have caught up to his reality as this amazing player, but 10-7 is like he's 12K on FanDuel, which is like appropriate. 10-7 on DK, you can still argue is a little cheap. So if he's in, happy to get there. Maybe the Q tag lowers ownership, especially if it comes in after the news comes in after lock. I will be looking his way quite a bit. But if he's out, certainly Zach Collins is the one that jumps out the most at 4-5. Center only is a little limiting, certainly on this slate. But, with this game and one more starting after 8, I guess you can leave positions open and try to make it work late swap-wise. Vassell, Sohan, and Keldon Johnson are going to get big usage boosts if Wemby's out. That's just a ton of usage he's going to be vacating. So those 3 are going to be excellent. I think Vassell, regardless, looks good. Sohan and Keldon I would not play together, but I think you can play them individually just because they're both kind of in the low 5s, even if Wemby's in, kind of as dart throws. And then Trey Jones, 5'6", another reasonable salary on a starter. Yeah, there's reason to look to all of them. Champagny is also questionable after missing the last game. We saw Branham start and play well in the last game without him. So Branham, I guess, at 4-3 is another value to consider if Champagny's out.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'd be starting with Zach Collins as a core play if Wemby is out, and then I definitely would trickle it down a little bit to these other guys. I'd be focusing more on the cheap guys, and Vassell is very much a play at 7.6K, but I just don't know if I would necessarily get to him. But yeah, I mean, good point. I mean, Wemby is coming in at 6% ownership with a really nice projection. So, and the status is going to keep his ownership in check unless it comes in before lock. Very, very interesting, especially with Luka in the game after him, also questionable. So yeah, something to keep an eye on for sure. The Rockets, Şengün projects pretty well. He's a good price, 23% boom rating. Spurs are a good matchup. So he looks good. And obviously you got Fred VanVleet. Price came up a little bit to 7.3, but still a little cheap. How are you feeling about the Rockets here?
Yeah, the one that stands out is Jalen Green, which is always really nerve-wracking. Like, he has such a low floor. He will get benched. He'll play 23 minutes. He'll shoot 2 for 13 from the field for like a 10-game stretch. And then he'll have one good game, and then his ownership will skyrocket. And that happened 2 days ago. He wound up paying off that chalk. He's come up to 6-7. He's projecting to be chalky again. I'm reluctant to go there. I know the floor is really volatile and not stable at all. So I get why he's popular. He's a little underpriced. He does have a ceiling, but I'm looking to go away from that. Şengün and VanVleet look like good pivots, certainly. Neither's going to be contrarian, but relative to Green's ownership that I see, it looks like they're a little bit less popular. So I do like both of them. Şengün's the one that stands out at 8-2. And then, Jabari Smith, maybe 6-7. He's priced up, but that should keep his ownership in check too. I don't mind him as a pivot away from Jalen Green either.
Yeah, Jalen Green helped me advance in my Dynasty Fantasy Basketball League, so not sad about that 57-point burger he dropped. That was cool. But as far as DFS goes, chalky Jalen Green is not something I'm into, so I'll be looking to get away from that as well. Şengün is probably the play that stands out the most for me here. Good projection, good price, good matchup. And the ownership isn't egregious, coming at like sub 15%. I like that, a good deal, especially if Bam's going to be chalky, then that'd be a pretty nice pivot. But yeah, nothing else standing out beyond what you said. All right, last game of the night, Pacers and Mavs. Pretty massive news with Luka Doncic not quite officially in yet. The Pacers may not have Aaron Nesmith, which could impact Benedict Matherin's value to a degree. Tyrese Haliburton has been pretty bad. But his price has come down.
He sure has.
He's too cheap for his talent level, and the matchup is pretty good. He projects well. He has a 20% boom rating, and he's not going to be owned at all. So Hallie is interesting to me. I think he is a very good tournament play. Risky, and his form is god-awful, but he is pretty interesting. Do you like him tonight, and are there any other Pacers that stand out for you?
I think he's fine. There are just other ways I'd rather spend. Like, I understand he's underpriced, and the game environment is really good. So I see the merit to looking his way, and he won't be shooting under 20% forever. So, yeah, I probably won't be going there, but I see the merit to it. Siakam's the one that stands out more for 7-6, though. He's definitely underpriced. He's been kind of back to his stat-stuffing ways of late. Don't mind the game environment for him either. Miles Turner looks decent, too. He always kind of looks decent to me. And then I don't hate Jalen Smith as a punt. Away from some of those other chalkier, like Jordan Nwora style punts. Jalen Smith is like 400 more. They're both going to see under 20 minutes. So if they both have low minute ceilings, I'll just take the guy that's lower owned.
Yep, good call. Yeah, Siakam looks good at that price for sure. Miles Turner also is pretty good. I don't really want to play Halliburton, but it is interesting his price to come down, and he's not going to be owned. On the other side, to close things up, are the Mavs. Luka Doncic is questionable. He is 12.2K. He has by far the best projection of the slate. It was 70 earlier in the day. It's coming in at a comfortable 69.4. He is going to get ownership at 22%, although I'm curious if that drops without any news, because people might feel like they are in a bit of a, back into a corner here. If news doesn't come until after lock, you basically at some point have to decide between Luka versus Wemby or Luka and Wemby versus going more balanced. And if you wait too long to do that, you're missing out on, Bam and Jimmy. You're missing out on the Philly guys. You're missing out on Tatum. So it is definitely a decision we will want to consider trying to make before lock. How are you feeling about Luka, and what other Mavs stand out for you?
I do prefer Luka to Wemby slightly. The matchup is phenomenal. I think the matchup tips the scales in Luka's favor, even though he is 1,500 more expensive in a completely different position. But if I'm going to be paying up, looks like I'll be getting to a bit more of him. I think Kyrie for 8-9 is also interesting. Even if Luka's in, obviously Luka's out. He's the best play on the slate. And then guys like Josh Green and Tim Hardaway would be unlocked as viable values. But if Luka's in, it's really just Luka and Kyrie and nobody else.
I will say PJ Washington continues to get burned. I mean, if he's going to keep getting 32, 35 minutes for the Mavs, especially in a spot where the Pacers do not defend inside at all, he looks a little bit interesting as far as, mild salary saver. But, yeah, if Luka's in, nobody else looks good at all. All right, before we wrap it up, let's look at overall boom rating for this slate. Luka and Wemby lead the way at the top two spots. As far as starting your lineups off and going very highly owned on players or building around one guy in a single entry, who stands out here as somebody that you're starting a lot of your lineups off with tonight?
Among that group, it's probably actually Claxton, which is not what I would have expected just because he's affordable in the mid-range, no Daron Sharp, and a good spot for him against the Embiid-free Sixers. As far as top overall plays, though, I'm looking at Karis LeVert. I'm looking at Sam Merrill as values. Bam Adebayo is up there, too, I guess, as another center play, but I don't really want to tie up two center spots in early games with the Wemby news and all that. Olynyk looks great, and Terry Rozier, another one that looks like a building block tonight. Yeah,
I think for the most part, he's not seen on here, but Sam Merrill would probably be the first one for me. 38% ownership, 21% boom rating, and 4.1K. He looks like a very tough fade. And then if Wemby is out, if we can kind of project that in any way, Zach Collins at 4.5K is going to look really, really good. I will say, as far as studs go, Luka is the guy I want the most on this slate, and I'm hoping that the news doesn't come out until after lock, so that 22% goes down. Although Wemby at 6% compared to these high-owned guys is very, very appealing. And before we leave, let's look at the other chalky plays. Obviously, Sam Merrill up top. Let's not talk about him because we both like him a lot. But is there any other chalk that we haven't really discussed that you will be fading or being very, very underweight on?
No one we haven't discussed, but we have discussed Nwora being really fragile chalk for 3-4. So that's the guy to go under on. Cause for pause there.
Yeah, I'm going to be out on Nwora personally, so you can cue a 50 burger for that guy, guaranteed. All right, thanks for tuning in. That does it for our game-by-game breakdown for tonight's slate. Hopefully we helped you out in some way. If we do, please give this video a like and also consider subscribing to our channel, the DFS Build. That will keep you alerted for future videos and also helps us know that we're helping you out. All right, thanks for watching and good luck.